Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Turn Over the Tape. As always, my name is Keegan, and I am joined this week again by Matt. Matt, how are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Pretty good. Would that pretty good be from the Suns' win on the weekend, the first one for season 2021?
Yeah, it would have been amazing if it was a 100-point win, but I'll have to settle for 10 goals.
Yeah, I think as Suns tragics, I think we can settle for 10 goals. So let's just get straight into it. What did you think? Just overall thoughts of the game? As you were there live, I watched on television in Melbourne, but you were there live. So what were your thoughts? Just some overall thoughts, just straight off the top.
Straight off the top, it's probably the least stressful footy game I've gone to watch the Suns play. It was a case of, even though we didn't sort of blow them out in the first quarter, it looked like we were turning the screws in the first quarter. I felt like we were dominating everywhere we needed to dominate. We kept them to one goal, and that goal was basically nearly the last kick of the quarter. It felt like we were just dominant everywhere. And so I felt relaxed. I actually got to enjoy my evening the whole way through. And then obviously the second quarter came and justified that faith. And even though we had a slight lapse in the third, yeah, that feeling of, you could just breathe in, breathe out, and sort of just take in the day for what it was. It was great.
That's great. You don't have too many of those days as a Sun supporter, I can tell you that. There's a few. Like I've been to a few close games. I think there was a game a few years ago I went to with I think it was with our friend Steve, and we went and saw the Bulldogs and the Suns at Marvel, or I think it was.
Oh,
And we won by
yep.
like 2 points. It was the most stressful game I think I've ever been to. Yeah, I've got that feeling as well watching at home. I was stressed for the first 5 minutes because you never know what's going to happen. Are they going to come out and absolutely blow us out of the water? But we sort of controlled it from go to woe. They were in control for a little bit of the third quarter. They won the third quarter by like 3 points. But other than that, I think we controlled it pretty well. Our defense did really well. We're going to get onto it a bit further, but I don't know if our defense did well because we were really good or if they were just all over the shop. But I think a big win's a big win. And I think you take them where you can get them, especially there will be tougher games we'll play. There will be games that we will lose, and there'll be games we'll probably there'll be a bit of a margin put on us. But to get a 59-point win against a pretty weak team, and I don't want to be too rude to North Melbourne, but they were pretty poor. I think you definitely got to take those when you can get them. And our percentage looks very, very tasty. Like I think it's 127, and we're six on the ladder. So if COVID was to come now and stop the season, we'll take that, and we'll head to our first home final for the year. Yeah. So while the win was great, and we did really enjoy it, and we'll talk about a few aspects of it. Well, let's start off with maybe some of the let's get the bad news out of the way first. And they were the injuries to Day and Butterick. So having a look at the reports today coming out, rumors, don't know if they're legitimate, but Day has done his meniscus. So he'll be 4 to 6 weeks, which isn't too bad, but Butterick's the big one. He has the dreaded ACL. And when he did it on TV, you could tell that no contact, planted his foot in the ground, and he just went and grabbed straight his knee. So unfortunately for Butterick, that will rule him out for this year and probably the start of next year as well, which is kind of
that's brutal.
Yeah, awful because he's been I think he's played every game, maybe bar one, but it might have been every game since the start of last year. Just he fits that back pocket role so well, and he'll be really missed. So sort of without sort of talking about the Crows game coming up, who do you think in our squad, Matt, can fill in the roles of Day and Butterick?
Well, I was talking to one of my mates about this when we were at the game, and the problem with Day is he offers a lot around the ground. So, I mean, he's a forward option, but then he also spends time in the ruck. And so the conundrum is you're kind of having to replace two aspects of his game rather than the player. And I don't know that we necessarily have someone who can fill that role. I'm pretty sure Peter Wright's still at Essendon last I checked,
He still is.
So I'm not really sure. I actually think this requires something of a rejig, where we might need to perhaps either get a bit more creative with what our ruck options are going to be, or I don't know, maybe get Corbett on.
Yeah, that's my thoughts. Corbett, I called Corbett pretty quickly when I saw that he was injured. I was like, oh, Corbett can fill the role of the lead up forward. That's not a problem. I have questions about Corbett's goal kicking, real serious questions. He never looks comfortable kicking for goal, but as a lead up mark, he's a pretty good mark. He's a good lead up target, and his field kicking is actually quite good. So I think that he is the logical replacement for Day. As you did mention, though, the ruck situation is pretty poor because Corbett plays he's a very short centre half forward. So you then need someone to go into the ruck and give Witts a chop out 5 minutes a quarter. I did throw up. It's funny when that happened and someone questioned me going, oh, so who's going to ruck now? I actually threw in Hugh Greenwood just as a bit of a laugh. I'm like, you can put Hugh Greenwood in there. And
not the silliest choice, right?
and then that same game in the second half, guess who rucks? Hugh Greenwood. I don't think I'm relying on Hugh Greenwood as our backup ruckman if we can avoid it. But if push comes to shove, he might have to do that for a few weeks, which he's going
to. He might love it. He might love it. Gets to show off his basketball flair.
Yeah, he has that physicality. And so yeah, he might enjoy that. So so that's probably the one sort of switch. Would probably be Corbett in for Day. Would probably be someone I'd look at. And then Butterick. Who do you think is the replacement for Butterick? I know who I think will be, and I'm not 100% happy with it. But who do you think might be replacing?
Oh no, you go. Who are you putting in?
As much as I don't want to, and as much as I was sort of happy that he had not been moved on from the team, but we'd sort of grown past him and we'd sort of found different options. You've got to look at Jared Harbrow, and he's an experienced player, uber experienced. But last year we sort of started to see him come apart at the seams a little bit with some of his disposal, some of his decision making. Is always good for giving away a few free kicks as well. So that's what worries me, is bringing him in for Butterick. Probably as far as sort of some good seniority back there, and his kicking skills are quite good. But some of that decision making and his defensive side is probably not where Butterick's is.
Another part of that might be the fact that he wasn't ever presented a ton of good options in the midfield, whereas it looks like our midfield's actually working fairly well at the moment. I mean, I'd be more than willing to be optimistic until I've seen him play a game. I think that's a pretty fair trade.
Yeah. Well, look, to be fair, at least the Crows don't have Eddie Betts, who used to absolutely spend every waking moment ripping Harbrow to shreds every time we played the Crows. So he hasn't got that to worry about anymore. And maybe you're right. And maybe with the experience, the more experienced midfield now, we can defend in the midfield a bit more, which means the Adelaide forwards or any forwards we play against won't get that lace out service. So that's the sad news. We'll push that to the side and let's talk about the rest of the good stuff. What do you think of Noah Anderson? Massive breakout game for him. 35 touches, 9 marks, 7 clearances.
He was everywhere.
He was everywhere. Not much more to say, really. What do you think? What do you think of his performance overall?
It's every time you looked up, he was getting it out of the middle, getting it to a dangerous position. And if it wasn't him, it was Lukosius, and they looked the same at a glance as well from the second tier.
Yeah.
I thought both of those players were awesome, but yeah, obviously Anderson was, I think, a pretty easy best on, and Lukosius closely behind. But yeah, every single time he got the ball, he was using it effectively. He was getting it in tough positions. It was kind of like he was playing like an inside mid at times, getting rough, getting through the player's arms, plucking the ball out of nowhere and sort of just running with it. Yeah, it was a super impressive game from him.
Yeah, and I think the important part was as well that he had a disposal efficiency of 80%. So what that tells me is he's getting it 35 times and 80% of the time he's hitting a target, which is great news.
21 kicks too. So
21 kicks. Yeah, so he's not wasting. Though he's not just getting little cheap handballs like some other players in the league. He's getting in and he's putting it on his foot and he's hitting his target a lot more often than not, which is really good. yeah, 10 coaches. He got the coaches' votes. He got the perfect voters for the coaches from the coaches. So they obviously really liked his game as well. What do you think the ceiling is for Noah Anderson this year? How far do you think he can go? Do you think he can poll votes in the Brownlow, have a good finish in the Brownlow? Do you think he could maybe make the squad for All Australian? What do you think is the limit for Noah this year?
Well, it's tough. I mean, injury notwithstanding, because as soon as we talk someone up, they
Yeah,
get
yeah,
injured.
yeah,
But he was learning his craft pretty well last year, and he had some bumps and bruises to show for it in terms of what he was putting out there. And I know we were playing a fairly weak side on the weekend, but he dominated in a circumstance where we were dominant generally.
yeah.
And if the trajectory for the side is for it to get better, then we should start to dominate other teams as well. Noah can find the ball a bit more. I don't really entertain any Brownlow talk this year, but I mean,
Oh no,
in
I
the
don't think.
future, I mean, that's absolutely
Oh,
like call it. Yeah, I know you weren't suggesting that, but 2024, 2025, he could be coming right into his prime and just mopping up the comp. It's entirely
yeah.
possible.
Look, I definitely don't think he's going to win the Brownlow. I'm sort of made more saying maybe he's the leader for the Brownlow for the Suns. Maybe he's the Suns' best polar.
Yeah,
Um,
quite possibly.
because he has those. He's very eye catching as well. And when you sort of look at our midfield, he is a point of difference. You've got the likes of Swallow, the likes of Greenwood, the likes of Miller, who Miller maybe not so much these days. He's playing a bit more outside than usual, but definitely with Swallow and Brody and Greenwood, they're all very similar types of players where they're sort of your in and under, get the hands out to the outside runners and sort of your very inside players. Where Noah's definitely can do that, but then I've also seen him get the ball and burst out of a pack as well, which is which I think is something that as a Suns, as a sort of a midfield, we definitely do lack. So he's definitely a point of difference going forward. So I'm really, really happy with his game. So the Gold Coast Highway. Now, this is you didn't see this because you were watching at the ground itself. I was sitting in the sitting on my couch. And yeah, they kept mentioning the Gold Coast Highway. And I think I might have talked about this in a past episode, how I hate how commentators come up with stuff that just makes absolutely no sense. Like them using the word striker. I hate that. I hate when they use the term quarterback because that's not even the right sport and all that sort of stuff. But I did enjoy the Gold Coast Highway only because it was quite funny. So basically what they were talking about, and it is really, really obvious. And an example of it was Markov on the weekend, who had a pretty good game as well himself, was basically the team weren't, and maybe because this is probably more to do the opposition, the Suns weren't really going wide. Like you see the Suns, like against West Coast, for instance, they look to go wide and sort of kick it around the boundary, sort of hit up small targets. But we approached the North Melbourne game completely differently, where we basically got the ball and went straight down the middle, of which they were referring to as the Gold Coast Highway. It's the highway from one to the other. So they were just getting the ball. And Markov did this a few times where he basically got the ball, handballed it, got it back, and ran straight through the middle, straight down that highway from one end to the other. And there was a few times that we did go pretty close from going from one goal to the other in pretty quick fashion. Is this do you think that's sort of sustainable for us going forward? Or do you think that we sort of we don't have the skills, we don't have the personnel to play that type of game every week?
So, I mean, it looks to me like, I think the encouraging thing is you compare and contrast what we did to the Kangaroos to what happened against West Coast. West Coast, we had a far more controlled brand of footy. We were switching it a ton, almost like 2 or 3 times before we were committing to the attack. It might be to do with the dimensions of the West Coast ground, but I tend to think that a part of it is not wanting to blow the use of the ball before you've had it on your terms to some extent. So it was a more slow and considered game pace. And if we turn the ball over in the middle of the field against West Coast, it is going to be converted into a goal.
Yeah.
Whereas against a team that you're fancy to beat, and it looked like every Suns player was outpacing basically all the North Melbourne players, you may as well take advantage of the most direct route to goal if you're the dominant team. And they use that to their advantage. So I actually tend to think that it's reflective of a dynamic game plan where Stewie can say, okay, guys, put it into top gear. We're just going to be all attack all the time because you can. Whereas if you're playing against a stronger opposition, like I'm imagining against the Crows, we might be a bit more circumspect to start.
Yeah, no, I also think having that, being able to go one way or the other is also handy. Playing one way the whole time, you get sort of stuck with. Stewie Hughes had these guys. This is the fourth season he's had them, which is absolutely flown. Like 4 years that's absolutely flown by. But
scary, hey?
Yeah, it's so scary. But he's had time. He's now he's had this team together for 4 years. This is the fourth year he's had them together, and they're starting to sort of develop and there's look more cohesive. So having different strategies or different things to fall back on where we can control the ball, kick it around like West Coast, or we can just go flat out like we did against North Melbourne. It's good to have those strategies, and you can turn them. And the next step would be to turn them off and on and go, all right, we've conceded 3 goals really quickly. Let's slow it down. Let's kick it around a bit. Let's control the ball. Or we've got 3 goals in a row here, lads. Let's just keep putting on the pressure. Let's keep running them through. We might score another 3 and put the game to bed, which is sort of what we did with North Melbourne in the second quarter. I think we scored 6 goals to 1. I think they scored 1 late on, but we had a run of 6 goals in that second quarter. And that was when basically the Gold Coast Highway, as it is called, as they were calling it, is just like was up and running, and they were just going straight past Miami, straight past Burleigh Heads, straight down, straight into the goal square and hitting up Ben King and his friends. Before we sort of give our 3-2-1, just one last point, and I just wanted your opinion on this. Do you think, and we've talked about all the positives from the game, and that's great. Do you think it was a reflection of more of how good the Suns were or how bad North Melbourne were?
Yeah, I mean, like anything where it's a multivariate problem, it's going to be a mix of the two to some degree. I thought that North Melbourne were not very good, but by the same token, I think the Suns were pretty good. It's a tough one. I would like to think, glass half full. It's good for the lads to experience what dominance is like, right? And actually be comfortable and committed to constantly attacking. So like whilst North Melbourne might have played like witches' hats, I mean, it's a good training drill if you look at it that way, right? So I don't know. I think if you had a gun to my head, it was probably a little bit of North being bad, to be honest. They didn't look really good at all. I know they must have talked about the Gold Coast Highway, like you said, but there were a couple of occasions where, the ball would come free at Miami. You were basically halfway to goal when the turnover happened, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that like Oleg Markov, who seems to be the fastest person on the planet, can swoop in, pick it up and get rid of it at speed.
You know who Oleg Markov reminded me of? And I'm a big comic book nerd, so this is gonna be worse. He's dressed like it as well in red and gold. He reminds me of the Flash. Is the fact that it's just like a red. He was at times like an absolute red blur running straight down the middle, which was exactly what we wanted and exactly what we brought him in for. He's in for that pace. To be honest, I actually think we played better against West Coast. I think
absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think take out those probably the first 5 minutes of the West Coast game and probably the last 10 minutes of that game. Sort of everything in between. I thought we played better against West Coast. And I almost think that we sort of played down to North's level, if you understand. Like we were looking very fumbly at times. Sometimes the skills weren't 100% there. But that's not to say we played badly. I think we played well, but I just think we played better against West Coast. So it'll be interesting to see how we play against Adelaide now. We've sort of got an idea of where our level is. Will we be up where we play for West Coast and just sort of control the ball? Will we be slightly worse, maybe a bit fumbly, but really, really, really hard and fast like we were against North Melbourne? Or are we going to see something different, maybe a third type of Suns strategy coming in against that Adelaide game? Who knows? All right. So we're now down. We've sort of covered off the game pretty well. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up from the game before we sort of get on to the best on?
Nah, let's do best
No,
on.
let's do best on. All right. So 3-2-1, as always. So just a reminder from last week. I didn't do the votes last week. Lincoln filled in for me last week. So far, just on the leaderboard, Bose is at the top with 5 votes. Lukosius is with 3, and Swallow is with 2. So, Matt, who is your 3-2-1? You can give it to me in any order you want.
Noah comfortably gets the 3. I'm pretty sure Lukosius comfortably gets the 2.
Okay.
The question all week had been who gets, well, over the 3 days, however long it's been, who gets the 1. The thing is, right, there were a lot of good performances across the ground. There really weren't many bad Suns players. There might have been some that didn't pop up a lot, but like there really weren't that many bad players. Case in point, I know you love to beat up on DMAC, Keegan. You're an absolute bandit for it. But even he had a half decent game, right? Like
I was going to when I got to my votes. He's on the votes. I'm not giving him 1 vote.
Honorable mention?
2 votes or 3. He was going to get an honorable mention because I feel like he definitely improved from last week. He was definitely in there. He put himself about a lot more. His disposal was a lot better. And he laid 6 tackles. So I can't really too complain, but he's in there. That's his job in there to lay tackles. He didn't lay many or any last week from memory, but he laid 6 here, and that's exactly what he's in the team for. So I actually thought DMAC had a good game, and I think you keep him in.
Absolutely. On the back of that.
On the back of that, yeah, you can't drop him off the back of that. So Matt, you had Anderson 3, Lukosius 2, and who is your 1?
See, I'm torn because Sam Collins had a good day, but he didn't really get challenged for a lot of the day. It's hard not to go past the engine room, the midfielders. I don't think any of the forwards really stood out. King could have had a much better day. Rankin only really got a couple of junk time goals at the end, although they were fun to watch.
They were fun to watch.
So I think my 1 goes to Touk Miller.
All right. I think Touk Miller had a good game as well. Overall, so if I was to give a 3-2-1, I have Anderson at 3, like you. I think that he was easily best on ground. I could give Lukosius 2. I'm actually going to give Miller the 2.
Okay.
Because I thought that I think he's improved out of sight. And if you were to put across the entire AFL, not just the Suns, across the entire AFL, the most improved or who looks most improved after 2 rounds, understanding that it's a very small sample size, I think Touk Miller would be up there as one of the best improved players in the league at the moment. His foot skills are so much better. Like I remember 3 or 4 years ago, whenever he got the ball, I was like, he can't kick the ball. He's not a great kick, but his kicking has improved absolutely out of sight. So I've got Touk Miller for 2, and the 1. As I said, there's a lot of honourable mentions you could go. I could go somewhere like Markov. I've already talked about. I thought he had a really good game. Collins had a good game, even though he wasn't really challenged. I thought Sean Lemons had a good game as well, playing as a back pocket. He was quite good. But I think I'm actually going to give the 1. I could also give the 1 to Lukosius. His kicking early on was absolutely elite when the game mattered. But I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm actually going to give the 1 to Lockie Weller.
Okay.
The reason
he was good all day as well.
He was good all day. He had 25 touches. He gained the most meterage for us through the entire game. He gained 617 meters. And something that he's doing a lot more now is he's kicking goals. And as a midfield, that's what we need. We need our midfielders kicking goals. And if you actually look through the team, we actually had a quite good spread of goal kickers. Lockie kicked 1, Swallow kicked 1, Lukosius kicked 1, Markov kicked 1, Ainsworth kicked 1, Rankin with 3, King with 3, Sexton with 2, and then Day, before he got injured, kicked 1 as well. So that's a good spread. If we're going to be competitive sort of going forward, we need that midfield kicking those goals. So I think that was a really, really, played a really good part. And he's playing more in the actual middle now, which is good, not just on a wing, not just off a halfback flank. He's actually playing a lot more in the guts, which is with someone with his skills and his pace and his sort of kicking accuracy. It's definitely someone that I want to be sort of getting the ball in the hands of a lot more.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, we have a new leader on our leaderboard. and you can probably guess who it is because he got two. He just got. We both gave him best on ground. So Anderson is currently leading now with 6 votes. Bose is still holding on with 5 votes, and then he's actually joined by Lukosius on 5 as well. So that is our leaderboard at the moment. Yeah. So that's the North Melbourne game. We've wrapped that North Melbourne game up. So let's have a quick chat about the Crows big Friday night game for the Nathan Bock Cup. I got Nathan.
Yeah, I like that.
You can't go past Nathan Bock. It's more points for if they're retired. Like I could also go the Hugh Greenwood Cup, but it's not exciting. Or actually, Jared Lyons definitely. I've also got an absolute more obscure one. Harrison Wigg Cup. Okay. He never played a game for us. He was on our list for 2 years, did his knee both years. So the Harrison Wigg Cup, we could also go there as well. But we'll go with Nathan Bock. We'll rep the great man. So Friday night, we very rarely play Friday night games. So big occasion. Good Friday as well. So I know with me, with Good Friday, without sort of getting into that, I sort of get to about 7 o'clock, and obviously there's no pubs open. There's nothing really open. So having a game of football on a Friday night is always a good thing, which means there's probably going to be a lot of eyes on this game, which means the Suns are going to be front and center, and they need to perform, and they need to perform well. Matt, what would you say if I told you, and I think I've already told you, but what would you say if I told you that we've never won at Adelaide Oval before?
I would say, yeah, of course we haven't.
Yeah. Adelaide Oval has not been a good hunting ground. Even when we played Hawthorn there last year at the end of that game that I would rather forget, where Hawthorn absolutely took us to the cleaners. It was the biggest dead rubber game ever, but clearly
Puopolo.
Yeah, Puopolo absolutely ripped us to shreds. So this is probably the best chance we're going to have to win a game at Adelaide Oval in a while, because we're not beating Port, so I'm not even going to try and think about that. So this is the best chance for us to win at Adelaide Oval at any time. The Crows are interesting. They won their first game against Geelong a few weeks ago and absolutely dominated. But I think that was a game that's completely out of the box. I don't think that they're that good all the time. I think that was sort of above their level. They played Sydney.
I have a question for you about that, actually.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, how much do you think it matters about the length of the preseason leading into that game? Now, I have absolutely no read on it because I've never played AFL, but the fact that the season ended a little bit later and, Crows would have had a little bit of extra time to repair and recoup, does that matter? And then the fact that the first game back, it's a day game played at Adelaide Oval, were Geelong set up to fail?
Partly. But if there's still no excuse, like there's no...
Of course not.
Yeah, but the Crows probably would have ended up getting maybe 4 or 5 weeks head start on preseason. So you think about it, they're 4 or 5 weeks further down the line of getting themselves prepared for the season, as opposed to Geelong, who would still be prepared, definitely. Like there's still, as I said, there's no excuse. They were in the grand final last year with a team of stars, and they still got beaten by a relatively young Crows team that have some good players still in there, like Sloan and Laird. And Walker seems to have found his old form. So, yeah, that definitely can play into it. You see those good teams sort of more, they prep themselves to be ready and sort of raring by about mid-season. So they're not really hitting their straps in their best time until mid-season. So you'll see teams like Richmond, like if you look at Richmond this past week against Hawthorn, they were okay. They got the job done, but they weren't their absolute destructive best.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Carlton as well. Carlton were probably hung on longer than they probably should have against a Richmond team who is 4 weeks behind in preparation, but they did enough to hold on.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a way to put into it. But with us and the Crows, we probably spent about the same amount of time in prep. So yeah, so I think it should be a good game. I think the odds are actually surprisingly, as pessimistic Suns fans we are, the odds are actually, I think we're $1.80 to their $2.10 or something, which I find
AFL website reckons $1.68.
Oh, really? I don't think we're that those good. I don't think those odds really reflect this. I think this is going to be a challenging game. We need, like, you think about it, we need Sam Collins to basically stick on Walker. Walker has been their main avenue to goal. I think he's kicked 11 goals in the first 2 games. He's been their main avenue to goal. If we can lock him down, I actually think our midfield is now stronger than theirs. If you look at the depth, I think we battle a lot deeper in our midfield than they do. Like, I think Sloan and Laird are probably better than our best midfielders, not by a lot, but by a little bit. But then after those two, their sort of depth falls right away. Whereas we bat, you got Swallow, Miller, Weller, Anderson. Who else can you throw through there? Who else? You could put Brandon Ellis in there if you wanted. Yeah. You can put Brody's in there. You can put Ben Ainsworth in there. You can throw Rankin in there. You can throw a whole bunch of people through there. So I think our depth is where it's going to be won or lost. The ruck battle is going to be Riley O'Brien's a good ruck. Witts is also a good ruck. We need goals. We need Ben King to kick some goals. And you said it, he dropped a lot of very easy marks on the weekend, so he needs to sort of get that out of his system, because we'll need him to kick 3 or 4 if we're any chance to win this, I think.
But then he takes the hardest mark of the lot.
Yeah, I know.
There was that one sky ball where he had absolutely no right to mark it, and he took it in his lap, and you just think, oh, bloody hell.
Yeah, one of those things. It's always the ones they were like. It's when people shoot for goal, they always miss those absolutely blatantly obvious, like 10 meters out, 20 meters out, directly in front. They miss those, but then you put them on the boundary 40 meters out, and they'll slot it through the middle. So Matt, I want a tip from you and a margin.
This is a tough one because like I interrupted you, you were going to say that your Crows have had an up and down time of it because they got belted by Sydney, but they didn't do it that much wrong. They just didn't put it through the main sticks, basically. It's tough to get a feel for it. I think we'll win the midfield battle. It'll come down to how well Sam Collins does against Tex and how efficiently we use it forward, and just how much the crowd factor actually matters. I think we're here right up to our eyeballs, but I think it's going to be a close game. So I'm going to be, dare I say it, an optimistic Suns supporter, and I reckon we squeak home by 2 points.
Oh, 2 points. Close game. I don't know if I'll be able to handle that. I'll probably be a few beers deep at that point. I don't know if I'll be able to handle 2-point win. Yes, the rare optimistic Suns supporter. I'm also optimistic. I'm probably a little bit more optimistic than you. I think we can potentially win by 3 goals, by 18 points. I reckon,
so.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I think, it's won or lost in the midfield this game. If we can get on top in the midfield and we can put that pressure on them, that means that Tex isn't going to be getting that sort of that silver service that he might be getting otherwise. But it also means that if the services may be a bit up in the air and stuff, that gives time for the likes of Ballard to come across and help and intercept as well, because that's what he's good at, is jumping and intercepting. I think the Suns by 18, and that would put us at 2-1, and that would be, I would dare say, a good start to the season. If you were to offer me 2-1 after 3 rounds, I would have taken it for sure. So I think that's it for this episode of Turn Over the Tape. Thank you for listening, guys. Always appreciated. Make sure you do, depending on wherever you're listening, could be YouTube, could be Apple, could be Google this week. I got it sorted. We're on Google. So it's great. So you could hear us in any number of spots. If you are, make sure you do rate the podcast. If you're on podcast services, make sure to leave a comment if you're on YouTube, and like the video and all that sort of stuff. Again, I like numbers. I want to see numbers. That is my job. I want to see the numbers. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to this. Thank you, Matt, again for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem.
And we will talk to you next week. Have a good week.